42nd in the nation in teacher pay, as reported in USA Today, using U.S. Labor Department data. The state has legislated only giving one-year contracts, further hindering teacher recruitment, according to the question here. Statewide, more than 4,000 teaching jobs were unfilled just weeks before school started, as reported in the Orlando Sentinel in August. What would you suggest legislatively to help school districts recruit and retain high-quality teachers? And we're going to start with Ms. Karim.
Thank you. So teachers are the basis of the classroom. They have to be well paid. If we expect to attract the brightest teachers, we have to pay them well. And again, I have to go back to that $1 billion voucher program. When that tax money goes into our general revenue, the legislature can figure out how they want to use that. But when they sidestep the legislature, when it goes into some third-party account, which is pretty lucrative for the people holding that third-party account, then we don't get to decide what happens to those tax dollars. So we have to be able to reprioritize our budget. I know we have a finite amount of money, I get that. So we, at the state level, have to do everything we can to make sure that we are doing everything in the benefit for the state of Florida. So we could have expanded Medicaid and gotten all of that federal tax dollars. Those are our federal tax dollars sitting in Washington, D.C. We could have expanded Medicaid, brought those dollars into the state of Florida. The money we're already spending on healthcare could have been reallocated to education.
All right, Ms. Pazzadomo.
Thank you. I said it before, and I'll continue to say it. I do believe we should pay teachers more. We do have to look at the apples to oranges. For example, in Collier County, I don't know if you all know this, but teachers receive a huge benefit that I believe is estimated to be about $9,000 for insurance payments. And those are important things. But you know what we really need to do? In addition to paying the teachers more, we have to create a culture of appreciation of the professionalism of a teacher. That's the way it used to be. The teachers were held up with high regard. And it's become harder and harder to be a teacher, so we're not getting people who want to be a teacher as a profession. And to do that, we have to, obviously pay them more, but we have to celebrate the profession. And my whole thoughts are, and also we have to make the classrooms teachable. We have to take care, make sure the kids that come to the classroom don't have all kinds of problems that disrupt it and make it difficult for the teacher to teach.
Dr. Boddicker.
Yes, not to belabor the point, but we obviously need to pay our teachers better, and there are ways to go about doing that. I believe also a decrease in the high-stakes testing so that the teachers aren't constantly teaching to the test and feeling that their hands are tied in how they teach and what they're allowed to teach in the classroom. Beyond that, I believe that we need to do something about one-year contracts that teachers nowadays have. They aren't allowed to have contracts longer than a year at a time, and that's something that's unattractive to the teaching profession. And make sure that our teachers also are mentored appropriately and have people who are helping them and guiding them through those early years of teaching that are so difficult.
Mr. Donalds.
Thank you for the question. This is a big one. A couple of things. Number one, let's address how teachers are actually paid. Teachers are on annual contracts that are subject to collective bargaining. They are in a salary structure. What we have in our current system is whether you are a poor teacher, an average teacher, or a great teacher, you are paid the same based upon years of service and different accommodations or credits to your credentials, whether you have a master's degree, a bachelor's, whatever the case might be. You're on a salary structure. I believe that teachers are professionals, but professionals in the 21st century negotiate their own wage. They're not tied to a unionized contract. So if we want to find ways where our great teachers can make more money, why do we tie their hands to collective bargaining? That's number one. Number two, we have to be honest and look at the class size amendment. In the state of Florida, we spend $3 billion a year just to address staying consistent with the class size amendment. And according to many studies, there's been no discernible improvement in student outcomes. So we have to address that as well. My time is up, I know, because it's a big question. But if you want to adjust it, it takes more time than a minute.
Mr. Rommel?
First of all, it's a great question. Of course, teachers are public servants. They really, it is a thankless job, and they should be paid more money. But we have to either figure out how to get the money, Or look at technology. What Representative Niles said, in every other field, people that are better at their profession get paid more money. Yet, if you're a teacher and you've been there 18 years, and maybe you're a good teacher, maybe you're a bad teacher, but you're going to make more money than the person that could be a superstar that's only been there 2 years. We have to look at that. We have to look at technology. Technology has improved all of our lives and made us much more efficient. And we have to look at technology to improve teaching so we can pay more. And then we have to look how we spend all the other money. Again, I get back to the buildings and maintenance and everything else that we do. All that has to get paid for, and it takes away from our teachers' pay. But of course we want to get paid. Our police officers, we want to pay them more money, and last year in the Florida legislature, we did find some more money to pay them. They have another thankless job. They're all tough jobs, but you have to love the profession. We do have to go to innovation and figure out how we become more efficient in teaching.
Thank you. Moving on to our next question. The tax credit scholarship program diverts corporate business taxes that would otherwise be available to support public schools to vouchers that fund private and religious schools instead. The amount moved from the general fund has steadily increased over the years until reaching almost $900 million this year alone. In light of the amount of money involved, should the legislature reconsider the program? And Ms. Pazidomo, you get to go first.
Thank you. I'd rather you had Byron go first because he knows it like the back of his hand. It was established in 2001 to encourage private voluntary contributions from corporations to provide scholarships for low-income kids to attend schools that would be better for their educational development. And in fact, last year there was a rule approved that would tighten some of the requirements because of some of the concerns about the private schools that were participating in the tax credit scholarship. I think it's a good idea, particularly when you have students that are lower income families that are not thriving in the schools that they were assigned to be able to go to another school and to choose the school that they go to. Obviously, the goal would be to make the school that they are attending that is not helping them thrive be more successful, but we can't wait.
Would you want to go ahead and finish your sentence?
Well, we can't, it's not fair to the student for the time to go by to wait until the school gets better, because a year in the life of a student is like 20 in our lives.
All right, very good. Dr. Boddicker?
Yes, I think that we need to really closely re-examine the spending through the school voucher program. We are taking almost $1 billion out of the general revenue stream that could be funding education and improving every school for every child. And the vast majority of our children do attend public schools, so we need to make sure those public schools are as high quality as possible. And if we're taking away funding and continually draining the amount that we can spend on those schools, then that's a problem, and that hurts every child. So yeah, I'm in favor of really grandfathering out the school voucher program.
Mr. Donalds?
The Florida Tax Credit Scholarship has been a beacon of success in the entire country, and that's the bottom line. This program is for students who live in poverty. Most of the time, there are minority students, young kids who look like me, and they're thriving in the environments that their parents have chosen for them. Their parents voluntarily left their local public school because in the parents' mind, that school was failing their child. And so they decided it was in their best interest to try to do something else. The data reports came out on this program earlier this year, and it has shown without any question that the students who are in the tax credit scholarship program are more likely to go to college than their same counterparts that remained in the traditional public school system. Now, I think that we should of course improve the traditional public school system. We should improve education overall. That is our mandate. It's something that we should do. But I would never support removing that scholarship from our most needy students because their parents have chosen. I thought in this country we believed in the parents' choice. I guess we don't.
Mr. Rommel?
Jennifer Boddicker, just 1 second. She has 10 seconds left on her minute.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No? No? Okay.
Yes, we do follow-ups, but you have to answer the current question first, then go back to the previous question. Mr. Rommel?
Great. It seems one of the biggest fights we have in society, whether it's Florida or our country, it's about our children and it's about their education. We'll say the traditional schools and the unions and the superintendents keep fighting about the children. I'm not fighting about the children, I'm fighting for the children. Yes, we need accountability where the dollars go, but we need to expand options for children that have no choice. Just because you live in Naples, you have a really good chance at a good education, but if you live 90 miles of here in Liberty City, you have almost zero chance at a good education. We need to expand every single option, give every single person a chance at a great education, and I'm going to keep fighting for that.
Ms. Karim.
We must use our public tax dollars to make our public schools the best that they can be. The best that they can be. And yes, 1 year in the life of a child that feels that their public school isn't good enough is 20 years in our lifetime. But then we send them to a school with no accountability, where we don't even know if they're actually thriving or not. That, to me, is ridiculous. That is a false choice. The parents have nothing to grade that school on. The state has nothing to grade that school on. We do need accountability. That's how we know how these schools are doing. And we don't need an average saying that, yeah, some are better at getting to college and some are not. We need to make sure that every single school is held accountable. If we're using public tax dollars, we need to make sure that the public is making sure that our schools are the best that they can be. And if we're not serving those kids, if we're diverting that money, that's a disservice to them and the generations after them.
All right. Moving on to the next question, and you can see Ms. McFadden has arrived. Thank you. We're glad you're here.
My apologies.
Certainly. The next question. Some people believe that the state legislature has shifted its emphasis from local to state control of public schools. What is your position? And we will start with Dr. Boddicker.
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
You weren't paying attention? 15 minutes in detention. All right, here we go. Some people believe that the state legislature has shifted its emphasis from local to state control of public schools. What is your position on that?
My position is that we do need to make sure that we have local control, because local school boards do know in general what's best for their local area and the students in their communities. I know that there is a sort of an emphasis on shifting charter school control to the state level, as opposed to having local school boards be able to have more of a say in what happens with charter schools when they open, and how accountable they are to their school districts. And I think that that needs to stay with the local, at the local level and not at the state level.
Great, Mr. Donalds.
Thank you for the question. Actually, the premise of the question is wrong. The state is not interested in taking over local public schools. The constitution of our state with respect to education actually creates a dual responsibility. The state is responsible for making sure that all students get a high quality education. The local school districts are charged with carrying out that mission. If the local school districts are not fulfilling that mission, it is the responsibility of the state to step in. Let me give you one instance, because we have talked about how wonderful Collier County is, and it is a wonderful county. But in Jefferson County, Florida, that school district was failing for 13 consecutive years. That is the lifespan of a child going from kindergarten to the 12th grade. And that school district was either D or F, and far more Fs than Ds, for 13 consecutive years. It took us that long as a state to say enough is enough, and to step in and make significant changes. Those children that went through that school district, they've lost their academic time. And so if you were going to ask me, does the state want to step in? No. But we do have a responsibility to make sure that every child is getting a world-class education.
All right, Ms. McFadden.
Thank you. I think there is a shift, actually. I think in general there's a shift from home rule, which is a chartered right that we have, back to state control. I would point out that the State Board of Education is appointed by the governor. I would point out that there's also a Charter School Appeal Commission, which is appointed by the Commissioner of Education, who is appointed by the governor. No, that's not true. The board appoints the commissioner. The commissioner of the State Board of Education is chosen by the governor's appointees. So in a sense, the governor does appoint the commissioner of education. But the chair and members of there's a charter school appeal commission, and that's appointed by the commissioner of education. And what is that? More distraction. So when Leon County School Board,
Time's up.
thank you, but when Leon County School Board rejected Classical Academy's local school, it was overturned by
Time is still up.
Florida State School Board.
Okay,
That's my
your
point.
time is up, ma'am, sorry. Mr. Romo?
Great, that's a great question, and I don't really think that the state is trying to rule and take over local schools, and nor should they. Collier County School Board and their superintendent definitely knows how to educate people in Collier County. The superintendent, the school board in Henry County knows how to do what's best there. I actually think local school boards have had more latitude on paying teachers more and firing bad teachers immediately. So I don't really see that. Of course, we have to have standards. We have to make sure the schools are following up. And when we do have failing schools or schools that obstruct school choice, there needs to be a way for the state to step in. But no, I think local school boards and superintendents should run their schools the way they see fit as long as they get the results.
Ms. Karim?
There is a shift towards taking away local school home rule. We'll call it home rule because that's exactly what it is. So for instance, when they shift the CIP budget and make sure that charter schools get more of the CIP budget than public schools for buildings, yet those buildings aren't held to the same account, they don't have to meet the same flood control standards or hurricane safety standards, that is taking away control. That's actually removing the ability of the local school board to operate in an effective way. And so yes, absolutely the state is moving to take over more control. That example Byron Donalds gave at Jefferson County, yes, that was a failing school system, and when the charter school system took over, they asked for $500 million to take over, and they were given $500 million. If that money had been given to the school district to begin with, they could have actually enacted some important changes. So that should have happened.
Ms. Macedonia?
Thank you. I look at this almost as a global issue in that back when Jeb Bush became governor, Florida was at the bottom of all the states in education outcomes, not just expenditures, but outcomes. So the legislature had to yank it back to Tallahassee. We created this giant bureaucracy. The biggest building in the state is the Turlington building, which is the Department of Education. The pendulum does need to swing back, and it is swinging back. And we are giving more and more local control. And you know why we have to, and something that we haven't talked about? Because the educational outcomes need to change, and how we teach our students need to change. Because students are changing. They are not the students that my kids were even 10 years ago, that I was. Students these days need to graduate from high school, if they're not going to college, to be able to get a job. And only the local districts will know what jobs are going to be out there for the kids that are graduating from high school. So we need to look at the whole thing all over again and let the districts decide how they want to deliver education to their students.
Thank you. Moving on to our next question. What is your view of the impact of recent educational legislation allowing any resident, not just parents, to challenge the selection of textbooks and educational materials? And Mr. Donald, we'll start with you.
It's actually good. It starts with me. I was actually the author of the bill. A couple of things. It's actually, I think it is important that taxpayers, who actually are the people that actually fund our educational system, that buy the textbooks, that build, that pay for the buildings, that pay the teachers, and so on and so forth, that if any member of a local county decides that they want to object to something in the classroom, they should have that ability because they are actually paying for it. The second thing is transparency doesn't hurt any of us. It helps us all. First of all, we all disagree. We know this. In our families, we disagree. So you want to have an open process where those challenges can be adjudicated. House Bill 989 creates an open process where challenges can be adjudicated. And they can actually go through a clean process in the public eye, which helps everybody. Now, real quick, to go back to the thing about Jefferson County. Actually, when your school has to go through differentiated accountability, that's what happens if you're perpetually failing, the state does give you additional resources to help clean it up. So Jefferson County received far more than the $500 million over 15 years to clean up that school district, and they failed. And the new results are that they're doing significantly better than they ever did in Jefferson County.
Thank you, Mr. Donald. Ms. McFadden?
Thank you. I'm sitting between the two sponsors of that educational materials bill, and it started out that it would be anyone who bought a pair of sunglasses that was here on vacation. Luckily, it changed to was just county residents. But I've been to the hearings that they presented, and it always seems to be a partisan issue that comes up, whether it's a constitutional republic or a democracy. They can challenge, but we're also required by that bill to have a hearing officer that we have to pay for as a county. We have to pay for that officer, and it can't be a school employee, and it can't be an agent of the school district. So that's an additional expenditure that we have. While the whole county votes for our school board members, it seems that we should rely on them to make these decisions. In the last year, when they were studying social studies materials, everything they chose was on the state-approved list. And yet there were still hours and hours of debate about the whole section.
Thank you. Mr. Romo?
And I did co-sponsor the bill. When we talk about public education, public dollars, of course it needs to be actual and factual. If you go to any public hearing, whether it's a county commission meeting, a school board meeting, city council meeting, citizens are allowed to get involved. That's what our whole political process is about. We're entrusting our school boards and our education with billions and billions of dollars, and citizens should be involved. It's their money, and it's their future too, with the outcome of the education. And sure, they should be allowed to get involved and make sure it's actual and factual. And if they don't like it, they should be able to stand up and say, I don't agree with it, and have a hearing about it. That's what our whole process is about. Of course, it's fair. We do it everywhere else.
Ms. Karim?
So there actually was a process for people to get involved in their school district. If they cared that much, they could have been asked to be on the committees that reviewed the textbooks in the first place, instead of waiting till the very end to raise objections from items that were already on the state-approved list. Ms. McFadden brought up the issue of the hearing officers. There is no extra money for hearing officers. There's no extra money for teachers that have to look at these books and show how these are actually accurate in those proceedings. I believe in parent choice. Dr. Boddicker, when she made her opening statement, she talked about the fact that she made sure that her kids were doing their homework. They weren't doing their homework, I watched them. But why should I, as an individual, just walk into school and say, I don't like the textbook that kid is reading because there's a comma on page 46 that I don't believe in. I don't think it needs to be there. That is actually what people can do. And that is a total mismanagement of our school resources.
Ms. Pasadon?
Thank you. I'm known in Tallahassee to be an officious intermeddler in everybody's bills. So I want to thank Ms. McFadden for noticing that I was the one who changed the bill from any taxpayer. I'll tell you why I voted for the bill. Two reasons. First of all, the hearing officer language is kind of a red herring because it's been in statute for years. There is provision for a hearing officer, so it's already there. But I voted for the bill because I'm a grandparent, and I don't have any children in this school. I'm not a parent right now because I have grandkids and my kids are too old to be in high school. I couldn't object. What about the mentors? How many of you are mentors to students? What if you're helping a student and you read something in a textbook you don't like? You couldn't object. Teachers who don't have kids in the school system couldn't object. Guardians. We have a lot of students that have guardians. They couldn't object. I voted for the bill because it allows a larger pool of people to review textbooks and file objections. Now maybe taxpayer isn't the right word, but if you had a long list of who could, it would be difficult.
Thank you. Dr. Boddicker?
I don't agree with the bill because I think it injects too much controversy into the situation of textbooks. We already had committees of well-qualified people who were chosen by the school board to review the textbooks in the first place. And I believe that we should trust those people in order to know that they have the right expertise and the right qualifications to judge whether a textbook was appropriate for students or not. In this situation, the bill allows people outside groups, people with outside agendas to come into our school districts and push their agenda and make the school board spend hours and hours and hours defending facts that are in textbooks, such as evolution or climate change, that outside groups object to and want to push their agenda.
All right, that concludes that question. Our next question, and we will start with Ms. McFadden. Just hold your applause until the end. Thank you. Also, I will just caution you that we have one timekeeper, and that person is right here. Is that correct? And so you will indicate when time's up. We don't need help.
I think they know I'm.
All right. I just want to make it clear that we have one timekeeper.
Can I please ask what that noise is? What does that signify?
How about this?
There's some kind of,
It's upside down.
Their phones in your
We have time's up. That means your time. Sorry, we didn't get. Yeah, we have 1 minute to answer the question. You'll get warnings when you're close to being done.
so those sounds.
All right, here we go. And Ms. McFadden, you will go first. What is your understanding of the pros and cons related to charter schools in Florida?
Thank you. Charter schools, I think, do have a purpose. I know the Marco Island Academy is an excellent school. It fulfills a purpose. The Marco Islanders want their children to remain on the island, and they should be entitled to do that. It's also, I believe, nonprofit, and it's not religious. It's very pleasant. I know I've spoken to a lot of the students and teachers. They even asked me to speak, which was very nice. And they're happy. And that's what it's for. It's to fulfill a need that it does not exist. I mean, it did exist, but it fulfills a need that's not being filled. So I think it can be good. But what has happened, we've gone from 5 schools, oh my gosh, we've gone from 5 schools to 600. Over 300 of them have failed. They've been more expensive and open to privatization. Now half the charter schools are being run for profit, and I think that's wrong.
Mr. Rommel?
The pro versus the con. We'll just say the con. Obviously, whenever something is new, it can entice fraud, it can entice failure. With charter schools, when there's fraud or failure, they're eventually shut down. When our traditional public school fail, they fail for 13 years and we continue to put billions and billions of dollars into them, and the children have no option. The great things about it, and my opponent, Sarah McFadden, talked about Marco Island Academy. It's amazing what they do. The results that they get, the test results that they get are in the top 1/10 of 1% in the country. And you know what they do it on? $8,000 a year per student, too, which is amazing. So to me, giving students an option to improve their education, there are no downside. If the ones that fail, we'll get rid of them. The ones that cheat, we get rid of them. The ones that are corrupt, we get rid of them. But the traditional public schools that fail, right now there's no system to close them down and give children a better option. So right now, I think charter schools are great. There's more pros and cons. Thanks.
Ms. Karim?
I agree that charter schools have a role, and charter schools are not new. Historically, they actually did fill a need, especially in small counties. If you look at Collier County, we're doing pretty well, but in small counties in Florida, historically, there may have been a population of students, special needs students, that couldn't have their needs fulfilled in a charter school. So sometimes counties would come up with a coalition so that all the public schools could fill the needs of those students. Sometimes they would go to a charter school system. So the charter school system itself is not new, but the idea of making these schools for profit and still taking public money, that is new. And when we get rid of failing charter schools, they also take public tax dollars with them. And so that, to me, is a big con. We can't just get rid of them. They supply a service until they go bankrupt, and then they take their state money with them.
Ms. Pazzadomo?
Oh, thank you. The pros, obviously, we all agree on that in certain, first of all, charter schools are public schools. We all know that. There are certain charter schools that provide different services, like we have arts charter schools. We have school special needs charter schools that the public schools would not be able to address. The statute is really hard when you're dealing with low-performing schools to get the public schools to perform. You know, we talked about Jefferson County. We give the public schools traditional public schools a lot of leeway on trying to bring up their school grades. But if they fail, then we have to allow a charter school to come in. The biggest downside, and it is a huge problem, and we tried to fix it last year, and we're gonna fix it, and that is some charter schools buy property in different names, they go belly up, and somebody owns the property, it's not the district. We do have to fix that, and I'm committed to do that. It was actually in my bill last year that died, but we'll talk about that later.
Thank you. Dr. Boddicker.
Yes, there can be some excellent charter schools. There is a good charter school in Immokalee that serves migrant children. It's a nonprofit charter school and it does an amazing job. So there is a role for charter schools as long as they are in fact nonprofit and they're managed well. But we need better accountability and transparency overall for charter schools within the state because we do have a problem of fraud. You say, Mr. Ramos says, oh, well, if it's fraud, it goes away. But man, I hate to even think that there is fraud happening with our taxpayer dollars with the charter schools that are allowed to kind of open up just willy-nilly in our state right now. And if the people who run them don't have, the administrators don't have to have any sort of qualifications at all to open a charter school. And then if they fail, they do take the money with them. The other problem is the duplication of effort. If you open a charter school right next to an existing public school, then that's a lot of money to put into both of those existing locations. So I think it's something we have to examine more carefully and have better transparency and accountability.
Mr. Donalds.
Thank you for the question. I'm not going to spend time about the successes of charters. I think they speak for themselves. The biggest thing I do want to address is accountability. Charter schools actually have more accountability than public schools, and here's why. Because if they have 2 F grades consecutively, they close. If the parents don't like what's going on, they leave. If there are teachers in that school who are not getting the job done, they get fired immediately. They don't go through a whole bargaining process. So that's why they actually have more accountability to the parents and to the taxpayer, mind you, than traditional public schools. The second thing I do want to make a quick comment on. If you have a situation where you have a traditional public school that's opened up next to a charter school, the competition between those 2 schools for students, for parents to decide where they want to send their kids, actually makes the education better for both sets of schools. The traditional school doesn't want to lose students, and the traditional charter has to fight hard every day to find students to fill their classroom. So it's actually better for all involved. Real quick point going back to House Bill 989. It was actually, I think it was a legal book that went before Collier County School Board. It was on their consent agenda. And because of the hearing process, all 5 members of the local school board actually voted to remove that. So the process did work.
Thank you. All right, we're going to move on to the next question. But first, I do have a follow-up to this question. We heard a lot about profit and nonprofit. The California legislature recently passed Assembly Bill 406 that permits only nonprofit entities from operating charter schools in the state, that permits only nonprofit entities for operating charter schools in the state. So only nonprofits can operate, and permits the public school district to have 1 representative on each of the nonprofit charter management boards. The legislation is designed to reduce the amount of financial abuse of public funds and to enhance oversight. I'd like to see if we can just go down the row and get a yes or no on this. So we're going to start with Dr. Boddicker, and we're just going to go right down the row. The question is, would you support the first provision in Florida, banning for-profit charter school management companies? And would you support the second provision in Florida, permitting a school district representative on each charter school management board?
Yes and yes.
I hate these lightning round things. The first, I would say no, and there's data supporting that. The second one was about having somebody from the
Having a member of the school district representative on each charter school management board.
No, they're supposed to be innovative.
Yes and yes.
All right, Mr. Rommel?
Again, these yes and no questions. First of all, nonprofit and profit, to everybody in IRS explanation, is an IRS designation. Many of our hospitals in the state of Florida are nonprofit, and if you don't think they're making money, you're being fooled.
So let me get a yes or no, sir.
Yes or no, and no?
Yes or no?
It's my time. No and no.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Karim?
Yes and yes.
All right, Ms. Pasadomo?
Oh, geez, I don't know. And no, I'm serious, and I know it's a yes and no. We went through this last night. There's so many variables. I read every bill that comes before me, and I look at everything carefully. I can never say yes or no, because Everything's a shade of gray.
All right, very good. Well, thank you all for abiding by the rules. That was wonderful. It's very refreshing. Moving on to our next question. The Hope Scholarship is a new tax law that offers an automobile purchaser the option of diverting a portion of the sales tax in the general fund to vouchers that will pay private or religious school tuition for students who report being victims of bullying at public schools. What is your position on this issue? And Mr. Ronald, you go first, please.
Great. I think that I talked about this earlier. I'm going to fight for every child every single time. So if some child is getting bullied and the school can't help provide them a safe environment where they can learn, we need to protect them and send them where they can go. So yes, I support it.
Ms. Karim?
Of course, we need to protect children from bullying. The Hope Scholarship is not a way to do that. All a parent or child has to do is say, oh, I'm being bullied, I want to go to a religious school. Now we're using taxpayer dollars to go to a religious school with no accountability, and we're doing nothing to fix the bullying problem in that public school. If we have the resources to send that kid to a private school, we need to spend those resources and allow them to succeed in the school that they're already attending.
And Ms. Pazadomo?
Thank you. First of all, if there's a bullying situation under the statute, there has to be a hearing, the principal has to be notified. It's not just the parent saying, oh, I'm going to send my kids somewhere. I'll tell you, the biggest objection to this was, you got to deal with the bullies, not the bullied. We did deal with the bullies in another area, and that is every school district, the mental health funding needs to have a plan. How are you going to deal with bullies? What are you going to do with bullies? Every school district is now creating that plan. And I'll tell you why I support this bill. How many of you got bullied in school? You want to admit it? Maybe not. But a kid that's bullied in school is tagged forever in that school as being a bullied student. And it's really hard to get through school if everybody knows you're the wimp that got bullied. So frankly, I think those students should be allowed to go somewhere to get a fresh start so that they're not going to have to live with that hanging over their head forever. Now, I wasn't bullied, just in case you asked, but...
Dr. Bodker?
Yes, actually I was bullied quite a bit, so I have a great amount of sympathy for children who are bullied. And the part of the bill that I do support actually is the part that says the bullied child could go to another public school. I don't support allowing that child to get a taxpayer-funded scholarship to a private or a religious school for the reasons that I've already stated. This tends to balloon, and we're already talking about quite a bit of money that is being set aside for this program. It means that those dollars do not stay within the general revenue fund to help us with our public education system that really needs additional funding. So I don't support the taxpayer-funded scholarship to a private school, but I would support allowing that child to move within the public school system.
Mr. Dowles?
Well, that's another bill that I authored and sponsored, so obviously I support it. I will relate to you two stories. The first one is when I had a mother come to my office in Tallahassee with tears in her eyes because her daughter was subjected to serious physical abuse. Another story is a story of somebody who lives in my district. Their child went to a middle school here in Collier County, and her daughter was subjected to sexual assault. And when she went to the school district, and when she went to the teachers at that school, the behavior didn't change. So what did she do? She pulled her child out, she homeschooled her child. These are the real stories that are happening. And so I don't like to make it partisan. I talk about the reality on the ground. I had a conversation with a school board member from the east coast of Florida. I saw her at a conference, and she opposed the bill outright. And when I saw her, she says, you know I hate that bill. I'm like, I know you hate the bill. And she said, well, what I did is I went into my schools and I started talking to my students so that we can make sure we can address bullying at the root. And I commended her for it. So if the Hope Scholarship does that, then that's better for all children. And that is the ground I stake. I was doing everything to make sure it's better for all children.
Thank you. Ms. McFadden?
Thank you.
Excuse me, I ask that you not applaud. It is not fair to the candidates, and it takes time away. So please don't.
Ms. McFadden?
Thank you. At a time when we're already underinvesting in traditional public schools, I can't see diverting money from general revenue funds. The money is being processed at it costs to process these funds through $14 million for the first year. That's a significant amount of money that could go for counselors and help for both the bullied and the bullies. Bullies, they stay in the school. They just look for fresh people to harass. They're more likely to be incarcerated. They're more likely to have long-term problems. We should hold them accountable, but don't criminalize youthful behavior. Deal with it where it happens.
All right, and that concludes that round of that question. We will move to our next question. Although a state statute requires that bills only address a single topic, in each of the past 2 legislative sessions, omnibus educational bills were passed, each which included up to 60 disparate provisions. What is your position on this practice? And we'll start with Ms. Karim.
It's horrible. It needs to stop. To make decisions effectively, and I know Kathleen agrees with me on this, we have to make sure that we're able to vote on something individually. And so I know that there were bills that you voted for where you liked some things and you didn't like some things, but ultimately you have to make a decision, right? And so that, especially when it comes to education, is wrong. We need to be able to legislate effectively for the kids in our school. And so to be able to do that, bill by bill, instead of these omnibus bills, makes sense. It may slow down the process, but we have to make sure that the process can be more efficient. Not that we're introducing these omnibus bills with these horrible poison pills that some legislators feel they have to vote for because the other things in that bill are good.
All right, Ms. Casadomo.
Thank you. I think there were 2 bills that created the most controversy. One was in 2017, and that I was so angry about that. That bill showed up on my desk on the last day of session. It came from the other side. I'm not gonna, and it cobbled together a ton of stuff. I spent the entire weekend reading that bill because I had voted on Monday, and I actually voted for it because there's a ton of good stuff in it. But I resented the fact that I had to spend my entire weekend reading it. Now this last year was a bill that I actually was involved in because, as I said, I was an officious intermeddler, and that bill did put together about 10 or 15 bills that had gone through the process and included amendments that had gone through the process, and I watched that like a hawk, so that bill had passed pretty much, every single part of it I knew, and I worked on with my colleagues on both sides of the aisle, and it passed. That's the difference. A surprise bill versus one you actually worked on.
Dr. Boddicker?
I think we should stick to the state statute that says that a bill should address one topic at a time, because you do end up with bills that address multiple topics and then having to make decisions that I think may not reflect the legislator's true priorities because of that. And we did have many, the big education omnibus bills last year that were sort of put together and then voted on very quickly. Even the public really didn't get a chance to fully examine and weigh what was in those bills. So I think that's not fair to the public, and it's not fair to the legislators, and it does seem to be a way of certain people within the legislature passing, stuff all together. I don't think it's right. We should address one topic at a time.
Mr. Donald?
Thank you. I actually do a good portion of my legislative work is in the education framework. So with respect to 7069 and 7055, I know for certain the Florida House, each one of those measures went through all committees' house and were all voted off the House floor. They were combined into one education package, 7069 in the 2017 year, 7055 earlier this year. But they did go through the process. Members in each subcommittee voted, members in the full committee voted, members on the floor voted, and then all those policy items were added, put together into one bill, and then that was then voted off the floors as well, passed and signed by the governor. What I do want to go back to is about the Hope Scholarship, because I forgot to talk about what we do with the bullies. Since 2009, in the state of Florida, we have passed more than 12 different policies, state laws dealing with bullying. We've given school districts broad powers to address bullying. They've received funding to address bullying. School districts are empowered to do it, they receive money to do it. There's only 3 counties in our state that actually take those dollars and apply them to bullying programs. So the time is there and the authority is there for local school districts to act on the bullying.
Ms. McFadden?
In 2016, 187055 was a bundle of legislation. That shifted millions and will be eventually billions to taxpayers' dollars, of taxpayer dollars to nonprofits, from traditional public schools. In 2017, it was 7069, and that took public school construction dollars that had to be now shared with charter schools. These are all important issues, and the bills were hundreds of pages long, and things were stuffed in there in odd places that had big effects. So I don't think it's a good plan.
All right, very good. Mr. Rowland.
Does anybody here ever watch C-SPAN? Yeah, well, surprised. Well, as a legislator, in the perfect world, I wish every bill stood on its own, but because of partisan politics, they don't. That's just a fact. But I can tell you on these omnibus bills, most of them are voted on and approved by both sides. And every bill goes through multiple committees. And, so they are vetted, and I do wish that they stood on their own, but as a part-time legislator, we wouldn't be part-time, we would be there 360 days a year, and that's just a fact. I mean, DC, it's amazing what sometimes they do or they don't do, but in Tallahassee, I can tell you the bills that we have, they're vetted through multiple committees. Do I wish as an individual legislator, as a person that actually watched C-SPAN also, that they stood alone as in each individual? I do, but that's just not how it happened. These large bills.
Very good, thank you. And our next question. Regarding schools that receive grades of D or F for 2 consecutive years, recent legislation requires designated charter school operators renamed Schools of Hope to take over these underperforming schools, but does not require them to use the same buildings, accept all students, or provide transportation. What is your position on this legislation? And we start with Ms. Pasadona.
Thank you. Frankly, I do believe that if a charter school has to take over a persistently failing school, that they should have to take every student. Because what are we going to do with the kids that are left behind? And I have tried to fight for that. There's a whole number of things that we need to address. That is one of them. We do have some really cool stuff that we looked at dealing with some failing schools. Taking a grade A principal and letting a principal handle 3 or 4 schools. So there's a lot of good things that we did. That's one thing that I'm not really happy about, but I'm going to work on it.
Dr. Bonaker?
Yes, I'm not in favor of the Schools of Hope program. I think punishment of those schools by making them become charter schools, where we may have a for-profit charter school coming in and managing a school. I'm not in favor of it. I feel like that's passing the buck, and then we are also perhaps losing money in that for-profit school, because a for-profit school is for-profit. Somebody's making money and putting it in their wallet from educating our children, and I just personally don't want my tax dollars going toward that. I think we need to make sure that we give every opportunity for that public school to improve. I don't think 2 years of a D or an F in a punitive environment of high stakes testing should mean that that becomes a charter school and somebody gets to make money off of my tax dollars.
All right, and Mr. Dobbs.
Thank you. Schools of Hope legislation, what it calls for specifically, there are actually 3 options available to a traditional public school that has 2 consecutive years of F. It's actually 3 years of D's and 2 years of F, and then you have to go through one of the differentiated accountability measures. A couple of things. Number one, we've already said here, and everybody agrees, a child only gets 1 shot at their education. Us adults, we can come back and try again, and try again, and try again. But those kids only get 1 time. So if the local school district isn't getting the job done, why would we stop a charter operator who has a demonstrated track record of success? And that's what's in the law. A demonstrated track record of success in like communities for coming in and giving those children the education that they deserve. I do want to make the one point about for-profit charters, because the myth is that if you're making money, somehow that's bad. Ladies and gentlemen, the superintendents in our state all make money. they're not doing it for free. They get paid to educate our children. Every vendor we use, guess what? They make money to provide textbooks, provide computers. And they're not doing it for free either.
Thank you. Ms. McFadden.
Thank you. Schools are often considered failures because of test results. There's more things to a school than that. A lot of our schools can be more than 50% non-English speakers. Cultural differences. I think that's why they might get a break. But if we open charter schools, then of course they would have to take all the students. I wonder if they'd be willing to do that, because they don't do that anyplace else now. There's fewer hurdles for charter schools that they have less accountability, and they have to provide fewer things. They don't have to provide special education, for instance, for gifted or challenged students. So, are the schools that are charters going to be better if they don't provide services like that? The answer is no.
Mr. Ronald?
For generations, children who went to failing schools had no hope. They failed. They're probably failing today in life too, because we, as legislators, didn't do something about it. Schools of Hope does something about it. If you have a school that's failing, yes, we stepped in and said, you know what, there's going to be an option, and we should have did this long ago, so of course I support it 100%.
Ms. Karim.
Schools of Hope allow charter schools to come in and just take some of the kids. That is not success. That does not serve every child in that school. If a charter school has to come in, they should have to take every student, and they should be held accountable. And yes, for-profit charter schools do take more money than our school district. Someone's making money more than just the superintendent, more than just the vendors. Above and beyond that, there's a profit margin that they have to achieve for their investors. Otherwise, they close, and that is wrong. We lose accountability, we lose tax dollars. Kids miss out because not every kid gets to go to that school of hope. It's not serving our kids well at all.
Thank you. We're going to move to our final prepared question, then we get to our audience questions after this. According to a 2017 report by the Leroy Collins Institute, a nonpartisan policy organization located at Florida State University, current trends appear to be resegregating Florida schools. How would you address this concern? And we start with Ms. Karim. I'm sorry, yeah, we start with Ms. Karim. We shouldn't have, should we? To the last question. So we should start with Dr. Boddicker, or with Ms. Pasadomo, I believe. I think we got this incorrect here. Am I right?
I don't mind starting again.
Yeah, we'll start with you.
That's fine. The segregation. You know, it's a troubling concept, but you have to take into consideration what's happening with our schools in Florida. The minority population of Florida is, in the near future, going to be white, because we have more and more Latinos coming into the state. So we have a problem in that you have a lot of, unfortunately, low-income minorities that live in a community. So that is a great segue for the tax credit scholarship program, because a student that lives in a socioeconomic deprived area that wants to go to a better school can, with the scholarship, go to a better school, and a school that might have more resources for them. It is a very troubling statistic, something that we have to look very carefully about. We're putting as much money as we can. It's just unfortunate that these are low-income neighborhoods.
All right, and Dr. Boddicker?
Yes, my understanding about this is that charter schools are able to open and operate, and in some sense they're responsible for this resegregation because they don't necessarily have to provide transportation. So that relies upon parents who want to access that charter school to be able to drive their child to school, and what if they can't? So this tends to segregate the population. Also, if a charter school opens up and they don't have to take students with disabilities and educate them, then that also is a type of segregation. And so I believe part of the solution to this problem is to make sure that the charter schools that do operate within our state do have to have a level playing field with the public schools. They have to serve every child, we have to have transportation, so that will limit this resegregation of our population.
And let's see here, Mr. Donalds, there we go.
Thank you. This question is actually very troubling to me because it is just very troubling to me. Let's talk about transportation. First of all, one of the reasons why charter schools don't have the ability to provide transportation is because they don't have massive capital budgets like traditional public schools do. This is something we tried to address in 7069, and what we ran into is that many school districts are so laden with debt that when you actually have them share local capital dollars with the other children who are children in that county, it was creating major financial stresses. So we adjusted that and we're funding that out of the state's budget. And there's a sharing mechanism in place to do that so we don't overload local capital budgets. So that's what happens with transportation. It's not that charter schools don't get to pick and choose who comes through their door. If a charter school's grade has more applicants than the grade can allow, it goes to a lottery system, and you just can't do it. And the reason why I know that is because I actually started a charter school. I know how the process works. It's not a matter of resegregating, it's the reality that charter schools don't have all of the dollars that traditional public schools do.
All right, Ms. McFadden.
Which brings up the point that we have quite a few people serving in our legislature who make a profit, their families make a profit from charter schools. I'm not sure if we know any here tonight, but that's a fact. So Florida used to be a model of positive change, but in the 90s, separate but equal reasserted itself. And housing patterns that are often racially and not affluent resulted in these schools that have an overabundance. And that's really unfortunate. I don't know how we get around that. Wages are low, people people have to work more than one job. They're not going to be able to transport their children to another neighborhood. I think we have so many social issues that it makes it harder and harder for people to get by.
Very good. Mr. Ronald.
Be very simple. We funded charter schools locally with our local budget, same way we did traditional schools. That would solve all the issues. But we forget, the reason charter schools were formed is because there's a failure in our school system. Even the USA News Today, which is not the most conservative news outlet, said that we have to become creative and innovative and give children and parents an opportunity to give their children the education that they want. They choose to go to that school. Teachers choose to work there. You have a choice. You know what? And I didn't read this report about this new segregation problem here in the state of Florida, but you have a choice. And if the demand wasn't there, these charter schools wouldn't be there. But there's a demand for a quality education for every single child in Florida.
Ms. Karim.
So that's exactly what this is about. This is about a quality education for every single student. And to have a quality education, we have to have accountability. And so for a child to then go to a charter school and then have no accountability, especially where the administrators don't have to even be certified, then the taxpayer loses accountability. The assumption is that if they go to a charter school, all of a sudden they're successful. If they're going to a charter school, if we're talking about segregation, or we have to make sure that that charter school takes every child. They have been given a lot of the CIP budget, more than 53% of the CIP budget for public schools, so they need to be able to provide transportation.
All right, we're now going to move to audience questions, and in order to get as many questions in as possible, I'm going to ask them by district. So I'll start with Dr. Boddicker and Mr. Donalds. You can answer the question. If any of the rest of you would like to answer that question when it's your turn, you can do so after you answer the question that I addressed to you. Is that understood? We just want to get through as many as we can. And I think we'll be